Hi, I'm Kubis, and I am a fine arts photographer who lives in Sheffield. So my experience in fine art photography comes from my lengthy experience as a travel editorial photographer for advertising and commercial purposes. But today, most things I do today are not for commercial use, but are to instruct and to lead other people to get involved in photography. I'm going to show you some things on my website. I'm going to talk about a couple of the classes that I teach. I'm going to talk about a workshop I'm giving in Italy and Tuscany. So if we could start there, we'll run right into that right now. So as I mentioned, this is actually a photo taken by my son when we were in Moab last October. So my son Dylan and my wife Maria and I embarked on a 3-week, 7,588-mile drive from Sheffield throughout the Southwest, returning literally 3 weeks and 2 days later. And Dylan and I spent the first 5 or 6 days on our own, photographing in Moab, Canyonlands. We did Monument Valley. And then after that, Dylan and I met my wife, his mom, Maria, in Sedona, and then we continued our trip. And what I learned about that trip was something really magnificent. Is no matter how beautiful the Berkshires are, there are other places that have an inner beauty of their own. So people will constantly ask me, well, which was the better place to be? Well, there is no better place to be photographically. They both are incredibly and divinely inspirational. So we had a great time there. But for me, that was something that I really like to do. But I am basically a black and white shooter. And basically what that means is I shoot a lot of film. I also have a digital black and white camera. I like a digital black and white camera, which is my go-to camera. But for me, the concept of black and white is really getting the emotion of the scene out. Now, many people will disagree with me, but I believe that color in many instances draws the compositional element away from the photograph. So my son Dylan, who has an interview here as well, created a beautiful book called The Beauty of the American Southwest. It's 60-some-odd pages of beautiful color images. I created a website called The Beauty of the Southwest in Black and White, because for me, that really represents what I shoot. So example that you have right here on the screen, I call it light and dark. This is a photograph that was taken in, I think this was taken in Death Valley, which was a phenomenal place to go. I wish I could spend a year there. And then as we were driving around, not only did we do some more stuff in Death Valley, this is the John Muir Trail in Death Valley. Now I drive a Jeep 4x4, so I'm not able to go anywhere I want to go. And I can tell you a brief story that Dylan and I, when we were in Canyonlands, we drove our Jeep down the side of the Grand Canyon, 4,500 feet from the top to the bottom. The road was barely wide enough for one car. Dylan wasn't that happy with it, but some of the shots were just phenomenal. But continuing about me, I find black and white to be stunningly colorful in many, many ways. I also feel, because I consider myself a fine art photographer that uses design techniques. I'm trained as a graphic designer, a photographer, and I run my own marketing agency for 25 years. I try to look at everything at a balance of design. And for me, black and white really makes that work. So these 4 shots are right out of Death Valley. Death Valley is haunting. If you've never been there, it is a place that you definitely need to go to. The shame of it all is you can't get it done in a day. I did, but you can't get it done in a day. I also stopped off at Mojave, the desert, on the way out west. And the Mojave Desert, again, is a sort of a spooky place. There are these ruins, and the shot that's on the screen now is what's left of an old ranger facility. Things grow really quickly there, but this fireplace just stood out hauntingly to me, and I found it to be somewhat of a beautiful composition. Back to Death Valley, I'm driving on this road that says 4-wheel drive vehicles only. If you get stuck, it's your problem. And I came upon these old water tanks. It turns out that if you have ever heard of the 40 Mule Team Borax product, Borax is a cleanser that came out of the Death Valley, and these ruins are actually places that they stored the water that they used to wash the remnants of borax out. Borax, I don't even think it's sold today. It's probably environmentally incorrect, but it was a product that was around for a long, long time. This is another shot. This is from the Mojave Desert again. The Mojave Desert has a very spiritual look and a feel to me. We were there as a family, and I walked out on my own, but there was just a feeling of uniqueness. There was a feeling that the earth was talking to me in many, many ways. And I don't do much post-production on my images. I have a general rule of thumb that I try not to crop an image after I photograph it. But I do experiment with Photoshop and Lightroom using different techniques. And in this image here, I lightened everything up a little bit because I felt that the image as it's shown here is more reminiscent of what I saw than what my actual camera recorded. Get another close-up shot of those water tanks. This is one of my favorite shots. This again is in Mojave Desert. This is a technique that is used that I often teach. This is a technique where you use a large aperture, meaning that your lens is wide open, which gives you very, very limited depth of field. So what happened is this plant, I think it's a yucca tree, was in focus, but as you can see, everything around it is softly out of focus. So this really was a truly wonderful trip, a wonderful time for me. I reached new levels of photography that I never thought I would have achieved. And I've grown from it, which is something very important for me. Being involved in photography for so long, it's almost spooky that I could learn new things. So I am actually, I'm actually been writing this book called The Rest of My Life for about 20 years, and I don't think there's a word written on paper. That's not true, there is. What I have done is I've created photographs that are of rusting items. Some of the photographs are in black and white, again, my preferred media, and some of the photographs are in color. But to me, rust has, besides having a very spiritual feel to it, it has a time machine. I try to sort of link myself into what this looked like new and what was done there. And I also tried, and it sounds sort of weird to people, I also try to understand how people reacted to what this was before it was rusty. We as a group tend to walk away from rusting things, but for me they attract me I just can't stop seeing them. I have a collection of rusted items. This is a photograph taken on Route 66 in a place called Shamrock, Texas. Route 66, as you may know, is that wonderful highway from Chicago to LA, done by a bunch of different singers, Sinatra, Nat King Cole. Shamrock, Texas is one of the few spots of the trip that the actual road, Route 66, looks like it did in the 1930s and the 1940s. And this car was sitting outside of a period gas station, and I just had to get close up and take that picture. Another little rush shot here. This is a truck that is actually in Falls Village, Connecticut. This is believe it or not, this is a snowplow up in Pittsfield, Connecticut. And if you've ever been to Lenox, there's a train station in Lenox called Lennoxdale, which is the home of the Berkshire, I guess it's historical railroad. This is a boilerplate from one of the engines that is left on the tracks. And rust doesn't necessarily have to be only yellows, oranges. It can have different colors based on the actual rusting item. This is a Department of Sanitation vehicle rusting in the field up in Cheshire, Massachusetts. So I'm always out there experimenting. I also do a lot of work with pinhole photography. I do a lot of work with digital photography and a lot of work with film photography. What I primarily do now is I teach. So I teach at the Berkshire Art Center. I teach at the Lenox Gallery in Lenox. I teach at the Litchfield Community Center, Berkshire Botanical Gardens, and I have a series of private courses. Just recently, last month, I introduced a free photographic walking session called the Berkshires Senior Photography Group. And basically, it's a bunch of people who are retired and don't want to do very, very extensive hiking, but want to take beautiful pictures. And we walk around yesterday. We walked around at the Mary V. Flynn Trail in Stockbridge. We spent almost 2 hours walking around about 2 miles and had a wonderful time. The majority of my classes are structured around smartphone photography. So smartphone photography, as you know, is probably you all use. It has become the dominant point of photographic use today. I think it's a great, wonderful media. I don't particularly think it is the ultimate, but I love it and I use it nearly every day. So yesterday when we were walking around the Mary Kay Flynn Trail, we were talking about this thing called the portrait mode, how to convert a traditional photographic technique to be used outside of portraits. We talked about this live video mode, which basically is a 3-second video that, using artificial intelligence that Apple provides, you could change the image into 3 or 4 different effects right in your camera device. I teach photographic sessions on sunrises and preferably sunsets, beautiful techniques. I lead a series of photographic walks through Stockbridge, through Great Barrington, Housatonic, Pittsfield, and Lenox. And what I do is I meet up with anywhere between 5 and 20 different photographers, and we go around taking photographs of the towns from a different standpoint. Sometimes the themes will be architectural, sometimes there'll be street photography of people, sometimes there'll be abstracts, and sometimes there'll be a combination of all those things. It's something that I really enjoy, and I enjoy working with other people. I also completed, a year ago today, a really unique series. I had always been concerned about shooting portraits. I've done a lot of portrait work, but I always felt that maybe this was something that I had sort of gone away from. So I created this project called the Sheffield, the Sheffield Portrait Project. And what I did is I ran some ads in Sheffield magazines and online, and we set up a photo studio in Dewey Hall, and I had about 12 or 15 different people show up. On my website, which is tbkphotos.com, you can see some of the images that were taken. I wanted to reflect not a standard stiff type of portrait. I wanted to do portraits that related to what the person did or enjoyed. So the portrait on the screen now on the upper left-hand side is Josh. Josh is a bike repair person. Now, he has a technical name for it, which I always forget, but I got him working on bikes. The gentleman next to him is Brian Cantor, who is a drummer, and behind him is his favorite cymbal. Just beneath that is a couple who live in Sheffield. Their house is an eclectic visual treat. It's like eye candy. And I got them, I photographed them standing wrapped around all these different boating, different antiques from their life. I did some straight shots. You can see on the right side, there are some double duet shots of just people. I really wanted to get into the people and into their mood. So I shot some families. I shot some people from a standard of using old vintage lenses. I love vintage lenses. So the picture on the right, which is of Maggie, that shot of her is taken with a 1930s lens directly into a black and white digital camera. My friend Jonathan, who's an attorney out of Norfolk, but sits on the board of Dewey Hall, he sat with me, and this picture was taken. We were about ready to leave, and I snapped it, and it's the one that he really thought best caught himself. And on the bottom there is one of the board members and the current chairman of the board. Again, she was leaving. She had changed her clothes. I said, wait a second, Beth, let me get a shot. And I shot that, and that was with my iPhone. The majority of the photographs in this project were taken with my digital camera. I also use a Canon, an EOS 1 DX, and I also use a lot of 4x5 film stuff. So for me, the media is as important as the creativity of the image. So I'm going to show you one more thing, and then I'm going to get out of your hair. So one of the things I do in teaching is I offer workshops. I offer workshops through, as I mentioned, a variety of schools and locations within the Berkshires. But by the same token, I am producing or developing a workshop in Tuscany this October. And originally, this was a 3-week Tuscany adventure that was planned for the year that COVID struck, which obviously was totally destroyed. And now I'm restructuring it. So I have a week in Tuscany. We are staying at a beautiful villa that a friend of mine owns in Cortona. We're going to spend a week. There are 13 of us. We're going to spend the week photographing in and around Tuscany. And at the end of the trip, each one of the photographers is going to be given a photographic book that I'm going to get produced for them of their work. In addition to having 13 photographers on my trip to Tuscany, my son Dylan, who is a fine arts photographer in his own right and has published 2 books, is joining us with the sole purpose of publishing a book on Italy. And that will be his 3rd or 4th book, because he's also publishing a book on oddities of the Berkshires. So if you want to see more of my work and you want to hear more about me, please feel free to reach out to me My website is tbkphotos.com. My email address is thad, T-H-A-D, at thad@tbkphotos.com. And you can reach me on my cell phone, 917-597-1891. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me. I will answer any of your photographic questions that I can on the phone if necessary. Thanks and have a great day.